Mark Rogers TV talking college football with Cam Underwood of SB Nation's The State of the U. And what we're doing is we're running a series. We're talking to top bloggers across the country, talking about their programs, best wins, worst losses, whatever the criteria, since they've been watching college football or maybe going back into the archives. We've talked Miami wins with Cam. That's easy to do. The 80s, the 90s, littered with huge wins over top programs. Now we're going to look at the losses. And Cam, of course, if you've got an average football program, the losses don't sting so much when you're going 6-6, 7-5. During the 80s and 90s, some of those losses really stung because those championships were right there for the taking, and they got more than their share of championships, but they could have won a few more. So let's go through some of the losses that sting with you, whether it's looking at it historically or just some of the games that you've watched in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, well, there are great games on both sides for all 30 years, not just 80s and 90s, but 2000s. We're building up in the 10s right now, but, for the last almost 40 years, really, Miami's, been a great program where, you have these things. First and foremost, for me, I actually was tweeting about this in the interim. We just recorded the wins video, if you haven't watched that, so there was a little break in between, so I was tweeting about, okay, we're going to do the losses, and my mentions for the State of the U Twitter and my Underwood Sports Twitter, my personal sports account, are on fire. I have Miami fans talking about this. But for me, I'm a native Michigander. There is no school that I hate more than the school in the state south of Michigan. They're the Acorns. You might call them by another name. Urban Meyer currently coaches there. It's a thing for me. I don't say their name at all, ever. But we played that school in the Fiesta Bowl in 2003, and we won that game. I'm going to come out and say that right now. This is not a debate that I'm having. We won that game. But, one of their alumni threw a flag late. Again, for those who don't know, I did go to Miami. I was in college at that time, had a lot of friends who were on that team. And my buddy Matt Carter, who was the holder on field goals and extra points, he actually was on the field with the team. The Sports Center set, they had wheeled into the corner, and the game day guys, they're there on the field. They passed out the flyers, the little papers. My best friend was marching band president that year. He still has the paper that says Miami wins. Everybody's on the field. We won this championship game that was very hard fought, and that dirty behind team exploded Willis McGahee's knee with that dirty tackle. And we still fought through despite all of that, and we won this game. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, this guy, this back judge, who went to that school in the state south of Michigan, located in Columbus of that state that I don't say, he threw this flag, and all of a sudden they literally take the game day set off of the field. There was a commercial break that was double long because they had to get the confetti off of the field. They tried to collect back the newspapers. All of these things for a play that was not pass interference. Glenn Sharp had great coverage in that corner of the end zone, did not touch that man, and he wanted his team, his alma mater, to win. And look, you can see how amped I am. I am a Hurricane alum. That is my school. That is, my alma mater, and I want us to win. But I would not go so far as to cheat to achieve that. And I don't care if I'm impugning his credibility as a referee or an official. I don't care. Terry Porter, 2003, you cheated, and you cheated Miami out of the 6th one for the thumb on the other hand, because we already have 5 championships, which is more than most schools can say. And it makes me so mad just even thinking about it, because we won that game. They go on and they score in that overtime. They go into double overtime, and we went for it on 4th down, yada, 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 later on. But we won that game. And one of their alumni actively cheated to try to, and he did succeed, to change the result. And it's absolutely infuriating. That is the worst loss that I could imagine, and especially it's double bad for me because, like I said, I'm a native Michigander, and there's no school I hate more than them. So to have that with the state that I'm from, and this is my alma mater, and this one mortal evil enemy did that, I can go on forever. But the Fiesta Bowl 2003, that is the loss that, bar none, I will never forget. And P.S., by the way, I will state again, we won that game.
Let's see, P.S., you did win that game. I thought I had heard that before. But, okay, we actually, for a lot of reasons that I won't state right here, we could go on about this game forever. We really could. It's a epic game in the history of college football. And Miami was supposed to win that game by 2 touchdowns. Maybe you shouldn't have been in overtime.
That is a valid point. The other team played a very strong game. They had a good game plan, apart from injuring Willis McGahee. But they did have a couple great plays. One of their players stripped the late Sean Taylor after an interception, running up the sideline. And if we would have held the ball there, that could have changed things. True, yes, indeed, I agree. However, all those things still considered, we won that game.
One other point I'll make, because again, we could go on about this game forever, because I know it fairly well. Is that when that flag was thrown, Miami had a touchdown lead in overtime. Ohio State had the ball. Ohio State then scored. That did not score. That was not the touchdown tying score. So Ohio State scored after that, then scored again, then stopped Miami. So there were 3 possessions consecutively that Ohio State won after that penalty. Okay, let's move on to game number 2. Worst loss number 2. It's cowering way down the list, I think. It doesn't sound like there is really a number 2, but...
Oh, no. There's definitely number 2s. There's other, games down the list. That one, again, just for me personally, especially being from Michigan, that one really got me. The other one that, as I was saying, we're having this Twitter discussion before we hop back on for this video pod right now, the Orange Bowl finale in 2007 against the University of Virginia. It was atrocious. They came in there as a 7-4 ball club. This is Virginia coming into the Orange Bowl, a good team but not great. And they absolutely demolished the Hurricanes, 48-0 in the last game in the history of the Orange Bowl. This is weeks right before the building was torn down, and is on the location where Marlins Park now stands. And again, I moved to South Florida, so I currently reside here. So I went to that game with a few friends who actually flew back into town for this occasion, not necessarily thinking, okay, it's going to be a national championship game or something like that, but is the last game in our stadium. It's right up the street from campus. It's well known that the University of Miami does not have an on-campus stadium, but the Orange Bowl was our spot. You had Super Bowls that were played there. You had the Orange Bowls that were played there for years, including the '84 game that we mentioned on the best wins video earlier. You had all that history and all these things. It's where Miami had a 58-game home winning streak that to this day still stands as a national record. And it was I'd never seen Miami football since I'd been watching play that poorly. And I sat there all the way to the bitter end in the lower deck, and there were people who were leaving, and it looked like people will say, oh yeah, there's no fans who go to Miami games. Well, that might be true, but I stayed to the very end, and it was just gut punch after gut punch after gut punch, and we had absolutely no answers for anything that Virginia did, and that one really stings, especially because it will be the last memory that any of us will have of our home stadium.
Yeah, I remember that game. And you mentioned the Orange Bowl, and it could be argued that the Orange Bowl is the most historic, or was the home to the most historic football games, both NFL and college, than any stadium in the country. When you talk about the Super Bowls, you talk about Broadway Joe Super Bowl III, you talk about the great Steelers-Cowboys Super Bowl games twice in the Orange Bowl, and on, a number of Super Bowl games, and then the Dolphins playing an undefeated season there, and all the great Dolphins teams, and then bam, Miami hits the scene in the late 70s, and they have that great run, and then some of not only their regular season games, but a lot of their epic postseason games played in the same stadium. It's unmatched in regards to a team owning a stadium that they play the regular season games, and then they play some of their biggest postseason games in that same stadium. It's not happened anywhere else.
Yeah, very true. We have a great bowl game that's right in our backyard, and it was, again, played at the exact same stadium where we played every, most Saturdays, all of our home games. So, yeah, that connection there, and like you said, all those great games. There was a Kellen Winslow game where he had about 500, Kellen Winslow the first not Kellen the second who went to Miami. Kellen Senior, who was playing for the San Diego Chargers at the time, caught about 593 yards of balls at the tight end position from Dan Fouts, who was the quarterback for the San Diego Chargers. So much history, absolutely, just rife with history at any game, at any season that you would look at. So yeah, just wrapping it up and putting a bow on that stadium and all that history with such a bitter loss by 7 touchdowns to Virginia of all teams. It wasn't even like, Florida State juggernaut came in, or, a USC in 04, or, it wasn't a juggernaut. It was an average team, and they demolished us, and that was really, what put that up there for me.
Yeah, it wasn't Ohio State either. All right. Okay, we'll move on. I'm going to go back in time just a little bit just to touch upon a few things. We talked in the best wins video about the origin of the great Miami teams, Howard Schnellenberger, the Orange Bowl upset against Nebraska, and where it moved on from there. So on the flip side, again, when you've got a great program and you've established this greatness, when you lose, it stings bad because it usually costs you a championship. They lost a Sugar Bowl to Tennessee that was inexplicable in '85, but the next year, the Fiesta Bowl, the famous one, the fatigues coming off the plane in Tempe against Penn State. Penn State, a huge underdog, played the perfect game, slugged it out against that great Miami team. Vinny Testaverde, 5 interceptions. Penn State wins the national championship. We talked in the best wins video about some of the epic games with Notre Dame. The Irish won some of those as well. Most notably a 31-30 game against Jimmy Johnson at South Bend. Really the end of an era after dominating Nebraska and Oklahoma in postseason play and some regular season games as well was the Nebraska win when Miami was going for yet another national championship in the '94 season at the Orange Bowl, and Nebraska was able to come back and really turn things around in college football. They had recruited differently. They developed a passing game. They were outclassed by Miami for a number of years athletically, but they matched them athletically. That Warren Sapp team in Nebraska won the Orange Bowl and the national championship. And I've got one written down here that I don't think we talked about, 2003 national championship game against Ohio State as well.
No, I've never heard of that game. I must have missed that one. Yeah, all the other ones you were talking about also, those mattered. Obviously, those sting. Nebraska 94-95. A lot of people still say that the '95 Nebraska team that won the national championship was the best football team, collegiate football team in the history of college football. I obviously will say the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, and I'm right. But the triple option on the '95 team with Tommy Frazier and the running back, I forget his name right now. That it was just a deadly attack, and they had the ability to pass a little bit more than they had previously in the '80s. So yeah, that was a really great team, and they did beat us in '94 in that game.
It took me a second, Cam, but Lawrence Phillips. That's
Lawrence Phillips, exactly. That, yeah, he was the power back that they had running the option with Tommy Frazier. Yeah, so very, very good. It just blanked on my mind. My last two, I would have them tied for third on my list, and they happened a decade apart, both of them at home. One is the Washington game in 1994. That was the end of the 58-game winning streak. They came in, and they played a great game. And again, I'm from Michigan, so I would always watch the Rose Bowl growing up, and, Washington was going there repeatedly, 90, 91, 93. They had, number 1 overall draft picks. They had, a great program. And, them going up against Miami in '94, obviously we had won previous national championships, so, that was a great matchup, and we had won 58 games in a row. I mean, we've gone many a year with not seeing a loss at home. You just, roll out, okay, we're going to come through the smoke, we're going to blow you out, we're going to, leave the Orange Bowl happy, and that game obviously ended differently. And my last one, obviously, at home, I have to go back to 1984 to the Flutie game. With the Hail Mary at the end. I mean, it's another game in college football lore, and a lot of people talk about how great it was on the win side. We were talking about that earlier with the wins video, but I'm on the agony of defeat, not the celebration of victory for that one. So those two, the Flutie game in '84 and then the Washington game in '94, those would be the two that would be ranked for my number 3 loss.
I'm going to bring a little perspective to some people that have grown up watching that Flutie play, because I was about 15 years old at the time, so I remember it well. Yeah, it was a great play, but how many times do we see? I think it's the most overrated play in the history of college football, and this is why. We see Hail Marys almost every week in college football, or every few weeks. Multiple times a season, we see Hail Marys that are just as incredible. Now, if that was a championship game, that would be another thing. Just a lot of people watched the game because it was the Friday after Thanksgiving, national TV, Miami was huge. Flutie had his following. Boston College became suddenly a team that people followed because of Flutie. He won the Heisman Trophy that year, much because of that play. Had a great season, no doubt. But that game meant nothing. Boston College lost a couple games. Yeah, they went to the Cotton Bowl. They won. Miami actually was a very good team, but they were one of those really good 8-5 teams where they'd lost quite a few games that year, very close to a very difficult schedule. So it was a very legitimate team that just happened to lose games. So that the game didn't mean anything, and it's a Hail Mary of which we see every few weeks, every season in college football. So I just think it's an overrated play, but we just tend to see it over and over and over and over.
Right, and I think the repetition of it is really what drives it to the number 3 level in my brain. I mean, and I agree, all that context is 100% correct. But from now until forever, if you have, it's in commercials in the background of the montage, it's always, you're talking about something, talking about a Hail Mary, everybody brings up Flutie, and ostensibly, well, not ostensibly, actually on the other side of that are the Miami Hurricanes as the team that allowed that. So, yeah, it wasn't the most impactful thing as some of these games, that we spoke of earlier, but, yeah, definitely drove it up a little bit.
All right, Cam, thanks so much for joining us. This was some good stuff. And again, we invite people to comment on their worst losses ever and check out the other video, best wins ever. And again, the criteria is wide open, whatever you want it to be in regards to those wins that were the most exhilarating, those losses that were the most crushing. Cam Underwood of the State of the U on the SB Nation platform. Cam, thanks again, man.
No problem. The first video was a little bit more fun than this one, but it's always great to talk college football with you, Mark.